notice Marianne's altered looks, and express his fear of her not finding London agree with her.
"Oh, don't think of me,"
she replied with spirited earnestness, though her eyes were filled with tears as she spoke.
"Don't think of my health. Eleanor is well, you see. That must be enough for us both."
This remark was not calculated to make Edward or Eleanor more easy, nor to conciliate the goodwill of Lucy, who looked up at Marianne with no very benignant expression.
"Do you like London?"
said Edward, willing to say anything that might introduce another subject.
"Not at all. I expected much pleasure in it, but I have found none. The sight of you, Edward, is the only comfort it has afforded, and thank heaven, you are what you always were."
She paused. No one spoke.
"I think, Eleanor,"
she presently added,
"we must employ Edward to take care of us in our return to Barton. In a week or two, I suppose, we shall be going, and I trust Edward will not be very unwilling to accept the charge."
Poor Edward muttered something, but what it was nobody knew, not even himself. But Marianne, who saw his agitation, and could easily trace it to whatever cause best pleased herself, was perfectly satisfied, and soon talked of something else.
"We spent such a day, Edward, in Harley Street yesterday. So dull, so wretchedly dull. But I have much to say to you on that head which cannot be said now."
And with this admirable discretion did she defer the assurance of her finding their mutual relatives more disagreeable than ever, and of her being particularly disgusted with his mother, till they were more in private.
"But why were you not there, Edward? Why did you not come?"
"I was engaged elsewhere."
"Engaged? But what was that, when such friends were to be met?"
"Perhaps, Miss Marianne,"
cried Lucy, eager to take some revenge on her,
"you think young men never stand upon engagements if they have no mind to keep them, little as well as great."
Eleanor was very angry, but Marianne seemed entirely insensible of the sting, for she calmly replied,
"Not so, indeed. For, seriously speaking, I am very sure that conscience only kept Edward from Harley Street, and I really believe he has the most delicate conscience in the world, the most scrupulous in performing every engagement, however minute, and however it may make against his interest or pleasure. He is the most fearful of giving pain, of wounding expectation, and the most incapable of being selfish of anybody I ever saw. Edward, it is so, and I will say it. What, are you never to hear yourself praised? Then you must be no friend of mine, for those who will accept of my love and esteem must submit to my open commendation."
The nature of her commendation, in the present case, however, happened to be particularly ill-suited to the feelings of 2/3 of her auditors, and was so very unexhilarating to Edward, that he very soon got up to go away.
"Going so soon?"
said Marianne.
"My dear Edward, this must not be."
And drawing him a little aside, she whispered her persuasion that Lucy could not stay much longer. But even this encouragement failed, for he would go. And Lucy, who would have outstayed him, had his visit lasted 2 hours, soon afterwards went away.
"What can bring her here so often?"
said Marianne on her leaving them.
"Could she not see that we wanted her gone? How teasing to Edward!"
"Why so? We were all his friends, and Lucy has been the longest known to him of any. It is but natural that he should like to see her as well as ourselves."
Marianne looked at her steadily and said,
"You know, Eleanor, that this is a kind of talking which I cannot bear. If you only hope to have your assertion contradicted, as I must suppose to be the case, you ought to recollect that I am the last person in the world to do it. I cannot descend to be tricked out of assurances that are not really wanted."
She then left the room, and Eleanor dared not follow her to say more, for bound as she was by her promise of secrecy to Lucy, she could give no information that would convince Marianne, and painful as the consequences of her still continuing in an error might be, she was obliged to submit to it. All that she could hope was that Edward would not often expose her or himself to the distress of hearing Marianne's mistaken warmth, nor to the repetition of any other part of the pain that had attended their recent meeting. And this she had every reason to expect. End of chapter 35.